Waiting down in seconds. Okay, so the live stream has commenced. And so as soon as I declare the meeting open at 6 o'clock. So I've got pleasure in opening the council briefing of the 6th of February 2024, and I welcome everyone who is in attendance. The City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present. Everyone is present tonight, so there is no need to record any apologies or any leave of absence. Okay, I'm going to open up public question time. Are there any questions from anyone in the public? Okay, no interest in any questions, so I close public question time at 6 o'clock. Okay, we have received no questions or statements in writing. I am now going to hand over to the CEO because we do have a declaration of interest.
To you, Mayor Zaman, the single declaration of interest that I've received for tonight's meeting is from Councillor Wallace, a financial interest in relation to item 5.5, which is the review of the heritage management policy. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Wallace's residential home is included on the city's heritage list, and this decision may impact the value of this property. Councillor Wallace is not seeking approval to participate in the debate, nor to remain in the chambers, nor vote on the matter. That's all, Mayor Zaman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wallace, for that declaration. And I note that you will be leaving the chamber when we get to that particular item. Okay, so I'm going to now go around and see if which particular items people would like to pull out from the agenda. Okay, so Councillor Warner. Okay, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. I had some questions on 5.4, 5.7, 6.1 and 8.2.
And 8.2? Okay. Councillor Lafontaine. Councillor Castle. Councillor Greer. Councillor Alexander. 7.7. Councillor Wolf.
5.6 and 6.1, but I think we've already got 6.1.
Yes, we do have 6.1 already. Councillor Hallett.
Just to flag a query about 11.1, which is in the confidential matters.
11.1 in the confidential matters. So noting that because there's going to be a question around that, at that point, the meeting will be behind closed doors. Okay, so just get this sorted. Okay, so we're going to go to item 5.4. Okay, so Councillor Wallace, did you want to ask your questions in relation to 5.4?
Sorry, I'm just going to bring the item up.
No, that's fine. And for those people who may be listening in at the moment, I'm just going to explain that people are doing this on their laptops, and sometimes it does take a little bit of time to get the relevant item up because there are this many documents for this meeting.
Thanks, Mayor Zaman. My question was just whether a demolition permit was issued for the removal of the rear structure.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, a demo permit has not yet been issued, but would be retrospectively after this approval has been issued.
Okay. Do we generally undertake enforcement for demolition without a permit?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, generally, yes, we do. So this came in through a compliance matter.
Okay. Would we be seeking to undertake some kind of enforcement action around the lack of a demo permit? Something that I've observed the city do previously. Actually, if that's confidential, you don't have to answer that now.
Through you, Mayor Zaman. So in accordance with our enforcement policy, we'll follow, I guess, the steps within that. In the first instance, we'll seek the DA approval, and then given the structure has been safely demolished, we'll then proceed to receive a demolition permit following that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions, councillor Wallace, in relation to this item? Do any other councillors have any questions in relation to this item? Okay, we will move on to the next one. So the next one is 5.6, advertising of new policy, healthy food and drink policy. Councillor Wallace, you had some questions.
I think that was Councillor Wolf.
I beg your pardon. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the challenges that I've found in being out and about in Vincent and elsewhere with children is that there are often healthy food options being presented for adults and then really limited healthy options for children. And that comment is based on my own experiences as well as feedback that I've had from other parents within the Vincent community. I'm wondering if in the development of this draft policy, was there any special consideration given to children's diets? Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, we considered dietary needs of everybody, including children, as part of this. I suppose the policy itself does not specify, and you would have seen that, doesn't specify children versus adults. I think it's more about behaviour change and promoting healthier food options. That doesn't preclude options depending on the event. Say the city is catering for one of its events, it doesn't preclude the ability to provide healthy options for children as well. And that's why there is a policy implementation guide as well as a FAQs that will support some of those decisions for administration when we're considering the types of events. So it needs to be fit for purpose. Children are welcome to a particular function, then that needs to inform part of that consideration as well. So it doesn't specify children, but it's all inclusive.
Councillor Wolf, do you have any further questions? Do any other councillors have any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, I'm going to move on then. 5.7, request to excise, sell and amalgamate portion of Reserve 25675. Councillor Wallace, you had some questions?
Yeah, I guess I acknowledge this is a very small piece of land, but we have a documented shortage of public open space and a documented lack of money to acquire further public open space. I was just hoping to get some further context from admin on why the city would support this request, given that there's no direct benefit to the city and a loss of 0.13%, I think it is, of city public open space.
Through the mayor. So like you've indicated, this results in a reduction of 0.13% of POS. But I guess the main thing that's contributed towards our recommendation is that this fence has been in this alignment since the 1960s. We haven't had access or enjoyment of that portion of the POS since that time, and it hasn't impacted the ability of the users of the reserve or contributed to a sufficient deficiency of that POS. So I think that from administration's perspective, excising that portion of land that is currently on the other side of the fence and hasn't been accessible is not considered to be of detrimental impact.
Okay.
Councillor Wallace?
Is there any way we can get some money from DPLH for this transaction?
Through the chair, we can certainly understand from the department how the process works and what transaction costs and funds they might receive from this process, and ask to be kept in the loop on that and understand where that allocation of funding is. But I would say that this land is not the city's land. We just have a management order over it. We take care and control of that land for the Crown. We haven't incurred costs for maintaining it, given it has been within the fence of a private property since the 1960s. So I guess there would be a question there of what loss has the city experienced?
Yeah, I agree. We haven't had access, and it's disappointing that it hasn't occurred to date, but I guess the potential for future access and the benefit for the community of that half a meter strip, I struggle to weigh up. What would the consequences be if the city didn't, or the council didn't agree to the request?
Through the chair, if the city didn't agree to the request, then the proponent is currently seeking to replace the fence. They wouldn't be able to replace it in its current alignment. They would be required to install a fence along their boundary line if that is possible. I understand at the moment that the dwelling is abutting the boundary line, so there would be some issues there. We would then need to understand from them how they want to proceed on that. They could continue to retain the fence in its current location. If they want to proceed with a new fence along either their current boundary alignment or the revised alignment, we would need to understand that a little bit more and see where that lays.
So DPLH needs our approval to lift the management order, or they could undertake this action without our approval?
Through the chair, I can provide that in the briefing notes to clarify. I understand the first step of the process is getting consent from the local government to allow for the lifting of the management order.
Yeah.
I've got a question, if you don't mind. It is, when you're giving further information, could you please advise whether there's a potential for any adverse possession claim in relation to this land if we were not to agree?
Through the chair, I can confirm that was one of the first things that we explored, and adverse possession does not apply to Crown land.
If you go out in the briefing notes as well, thanks. Just some information on how payment from the resident to the city could occur as part of this process as well, and what an appropriate payment would be.
Confirming through the chair that we'll provide that in the briefing notes.
Can I also confirm if we're looking at replacement of the fence on shared land, and are we still expected to pay for half of the cost of that fence?
Through the chair, under the dividing fences local law, the local government is not obligated to contribute towards costs of dividing fences where it abuts Crown land.
Excellent. Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Councillor Hallett.
Just in relation to if the owner is replacing the fence, it's our garden bed there, and if there's any damage to the garden bed, has to fix that?
Through the chair, if they were replacing the fence on their boundary and it impacted our reserve, they would be responsible for repairs to that.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, moving on to the next item. The next item is 6.1, licence to Minister for Education use of Birdwood Square by Highgate Primary School. Now, Councillor Wolf, you were the one that was asking the questions about that.
Thank you, Mayor. On this one, on the one hand, the report's considering the square as an appropriate use for primary school children. And on the other hand, there's also a comment in there around the square having a long history of antisocial behaviour. So I'm just wondering if that is likely to be an issue and how we might go about managing that. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair, activating space generally reduces antisocial behaviour in that space. Birdwood Square has had limited activation because there hasn't been sporting activities necessarily on that space. The use by the school will likely reduce the incidence of antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour doesn't necessarily occur on the site during the day. It can be during the evening when children wouldn't necessarily be on site. However, the intent is to use for junior sport to also use the ground in the near future, which would be through early evening to mid-evening, and that would also potentially have an impact on the likelihood of antisocial behaviour occurring on the site.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question around the description of permitted use being non-exclusive priority use for the school. And then priority use means having priority over competing uses. Just wondering if I could have an explanation on what that actually looks like.
I can give a general ballpark response. The school will have priority use during school hours. So we wouldn't book the reserve for sporting clubs or the like during school hours. So the school can have complete access to the ground through that period of time. They'll have access to the toilets and change rooms during that time. So they'll have access at that point, but it won't be exclusive because then sporting clubs can then access the change rooms, toilets and grounds out of school hours. And it is Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday excluded.
So does that mean exclusive use during the set hours?
That would be the expectation. I would, yes, if they wanted to access it, they could access it. I'm not sure of what form of booking system we may put in place, and I can probably put something in the briefing notes around that.
Is it currently a bookable space? Just not very well used?
Not that I'm aware.
I'm just wondering about how that works in practice for the school if they are running an activity and someone wants to walk their dog or use the toilet block or the other facilities at the school. Do they have the right to shoo them away?
They'd have the ability to have activities just like a sporting club would when they're using the ground. The change rooms will have public toilets, so people can go to the public side of the toilets. The school will access the toilets within the change rooms, which are therefore secured and lockable, and obviously would need to be supervised by staff, but wouldn't be any different to a sporting club using a ground versus a school using the ground.
And I'm assuming it goes without saying that the responsibility for the safety of the children lies solely with the Education Department and there's no obligation on the City of Vincent.
Yes, shared use agreements with public space with local governments and schools is not an unusual activity. It's a fairly standard agreement that's been put in place. And no, we won't be taking the responsibility of the children on site during school activities.
Are there any further questions? Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you. Yes, I was just wondering, with the cost allocation for the cleaning of the toilet cubicles, with the new license, could information be provided on what the current costs incurred by the city are prior to that license agreement? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We don't have a facility yet on site, so I could go back and perhaps see what the cleaning cost was of the former toilet block that was on site, but I wouldn't necessarily feel that was reliable. But it was estimated around the number of cleans that would be likely used for the change rooms. So I can, I think the estimates are included in the confidential attachment. If they're not, I can provide them.
Also, could I just ask if it's within the hours, the school hours, would that be inclusive of school carnivals?
That would be the expectation. If there was going to be some form of time needed for set up and set down in respect to that, they'd need to book that time. I would consider the use be included in that license agreement.
When during the election period, I was talking to some people on Baker Avenue and they had some concerns about the parking. Is that something that we could look into a parking management plan if there is a school carnival at that location?
Yes, I'm not sure where. I think I could be wrong that Highgate actually uses the reserve currently for carnivals. I'm pretty sure I've seen it set up for carnivals, and I would expect that in that process they'd have parking management plans in that point. So I can put something into the briefing notes to confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Greer, you had some questions?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So my first question relates to the facilities with the bathroom and the change rooms. I just wanted to understand if at the moment in the plans for the new facilities, have we put any consideration into them being used by young children, or are they designed for mostly use of adults?
Through the chair, Councillor Grell, need to get back to you. It's a standard fit out. I'm not quite sure that they've been made specifically for children and specifically for, say, K to 3 children. So I'll get some feedback in the briefing notes in respect to the design, but that wasn't a consideration. And in respect to the design of the change rooms, the Department of Education are contributing funds towards the construction and have had input into what they will look like. And I don't recall having a specific toilet facilities being built in them being a requirement, but I'll also clarify that in the briefing notes.
Excellent, thank you. And I've got one more question. I was just wondering if the school have given any indication on how the children will cross the road to get to Birdwood Square. It's obviously a very busy road and the traffic lights are closer down to Beaufort Street. So I was just wondering if there's been any consideration to any upgrades or amendments that are needed to, it'll be Bulwer Street, to ensure the children can cross the road safely or excitedly run to catch the ball which has rolled away closer to the road. Any considerations there?
Through the chair, I'll get something into the briefing note. I do know that Highgate Primary School does access the ground currently for various purposes, and this is formalising it a little bit more. I'm sure they have practices around their crossing of that street, but we'll ask what they have actually in place and include that. The consideration about control crossings and the like is a part of that discussion currently that we have.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, Councillor Hallett.
Can I just follow up about the design of the toilet in terms of accessibility for disability access?
There is a disability UAT in the design. It was more about a specific smaller toilets. Yeah.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Zimmerman. First, I'd just like to declare an impartiality interest. I live on Grant Street, which is directly between Highgate Primary School and Birdwood Square. It's not close enough to need a proximity interest, but I do live there. I'm quite close. I've got a number of questions. I guess we recently sold a number of residential lots adjacent Arranmore Primary School that were utilised by that school for recreation. Is there any inconsistency between that action and what's proposed here with the Department of Education, do you believe? So anyone that would like to answer that?
Can I clarify, is the question, is there inconsistency between a sale of?
Yeah, I guess is our approach to
swap
managing our property portfolio when we're selling land from under one school and providing cheap leases to the Department of Education in another location is, I guess, is that a consistent application of the city's SCP? I don't know.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, I consider it's not a lease, it's a proposed license and it's a non-exclusive license. People will still be able to access Birdwood Square to use parts of the grounds and the amenity while the kids are doing their sport or other activities. during the day. And there was a unique and historical anomaly around the land related to Arundel Primary, which we undertook a land swap rather than a land sale.
The department recently acquired 800 square metres of land adjacent to the school on Grant Street and dedicated it solely to at-grade parking, despite the school's proximity to the highest frequency bus route in Perth on Beaufort Street and a large underutilised city-owned car park 150 metres away opposite Birdwood Square. Does the department intend to continue to utilise large areas of their site for staff parking in lieu of providing necessary play and green space to their students? Are you aware? Or could we get a response from the department?
I can respond to that through the chair. The Department of Education's approached the city about obtaining and paying for parking permits for the Brisbane Street car park in respect to staff parking, upwards between 50 to 70 permits, and have been negotiating because the department's exceptionally cognizant of its growing numbers, lack of space, and the need to retain it for open space as much as possible on the site.
Does the department have a master plan for the school that sets out future parking, play, infrastructure?
I'd need to ask the department. I think much of what may happen on Highgate Primary School is dependent on the development timeline of the proposed East Perth Primary School, taking pressure off, albeit long-term with density increase in Highgate and East Perth. I suspect that Highgate Primary School will be a significantly high number student school now and into the future. I understand their numbers of students is over 1,000.
This lease length is 10 years. What's the development schedule for that East Perth school? And I guess what's the department's future development plans for this school, given they undertook a redevelopment about 5 years ago and they're back to 8 demountable classrooms on that site?
We can but ask the Department of Education in that space. Yes, we'll put something in the briefing notes if we get a response in time.
Thank you.
Councillor Castle.
I've got many more, but you can jump in if there's one relevant one.
Apologies, Councillor Wallace. Sorry.
I'll be quick and then you can have another go. I'm just wondering, for context, given Councillor Wallace's question about Arranmore, I'm aware that we've had similar agreements with other primary schools in Vincent, and I'm just wondering if that could be briefly outlined in the briefing notes, to just so that there's a understanding of where and how this is happening around the city. And my second question is the facilities available on site at Highgate Primary available for the public to use out of school hours?
Through the chair, unaware, need to ask the question with the school itself.
I'll jump in on that one and say no. There was a change made a couple of weeks ago whereby they now lock the school outside of school hours. So I had a question about whether there would be potential for some kind of reciprocal arrangement whereby the city's space is available for the school and the school's space is also available for the community.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that advice as well. I think that's often been the conversation in the past, is that this is about getting the most out of the limited space that we all have in Vincent, and an approach of shared spaces as much as possible.
Through the chair, we'll raise the question with the department, but cannot guarantee we'll have a response by next week, but we'll do our best.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question about the turf replacement schedule. I guess my observations are the turf at Highgate Primary School is destroyed every school year and then barely recovers by Jan-Feb, and then heads downhill again. So I think the fee was based on an estimate of requiring turf replacement at Birdwood Square every 2 years. I wonder what admin's view was, whether that was appropriate and what their view would be on adjusting that to estimate to being required every year and adjusting the license fee accordingly.
Thank you through the chair. The Parks team were pretty comfortable with the estimate they put in place, given the state of Burswood and the poor drainage. We're aware that we would to be able to ensure that that green space can be used not only by the school but also the community and also as a playing surface, that we'd need to improve and intensify our turf management on the site. But I will clarify whether we still feel it's appropriate, the level of replacement in respect to what use we anticipate on the site, both from the school and community sporting groups.
Cool, thanks. I guess in the briefing notes on that, if you could just let me know what the current maintenance schedule is, so like how far we are into the replacement period and what Parks' view is of the current turf condition there.
Noted.
Councillor Wallace, do you have any further questions?
I do, sorry, I'm just scrolling through them.
It's okay. It's the purpose of this briefing.
Oh, just I guess the bathroom being installed at Birdwood Square. I couldn't recall that being in this financial year in the last Capital Works program, and I didn't go back and check. Is this in accordance with the schedule in the last issue of the Capital Works program?
Through the chair, yes, it is currently on the Capital Works program.
Okay. I guess my question around it is on the visual amenity of it and where we are in the procurement and design process on it. And I presume it doesn't have to come to council to tender for it.
Through the chair, the construction of the change rooms is also subject to a grant. So we've received grant funds. It's gone through a process, and I believe it isn't a council directed or a tender that would need to be approved by council. That's my understanding. There has been some design work done around it, and it's a fairly standard design, probably somewhat similar to what has gone into Banks, except a little bit more robust.
Could we get some info in the briefing notes on where the grant came from, the status of the design and procurement, and a picture of the design if possible?
Certainly.
Thanks. And I have one final question. I guess it goes to the exclusivity. Is it necessary to grant a lease over the entire 2 hectares, or could we give half to the school under this license and leave the other half for community use?
Thank you through the chair. The intent wasn't for the entire site to be used by them exclusively. I would suggest that it's more the flat green space and playing space would be more it, but we can clarify that or in the briefing notes and for next week.
Yeah, something in the briefing notes, if we could ask the department if they'd be amenable to just half instead of the full thing. And that's all my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Hallett.
Sorry, and just to follow up, if we could get a little bit of context about the policy setting that enables a development, even if it's ours on public land, not to come to council. I get that we probably have set that up somehow, but it would seem in a very public space on public land that a development should.
Sorry, through the chair. This is our development. So the change room was a city project to begin with, funded through some grants sourced through the local member, which was originally, I think, going to be for basketball courts, but that wasn't required. So it transferred to change rooms. That design expanded because of a request through the Department of Education, the Highgate Primary School, because of their tightness of space, and they've contributed to it, but it's actually a city development.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, I'll just add to that. When the city undertakes works such as this to our land, we've got certain exemptions where we don't need to obtain approval. So it's what you call public works, because the city's undertaking the works consistent with the intent of that reserve.
Thank you. Yeah, and I get that it's ours. Has it been through the DRP?
Not that I'm aware of.
Through the chair, can I just clarify? It has been through the DRP as part of the project process as we were developing where it would go, because it's had a number of iterations on the site. And now where we've landed, that has been referred to the DRP in terms of the broader plan for the reserve as well. I can provide some further information in the briefing notes on that.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Simon. One last question from me. The term being 10 years, is that a standard length of time, or is that one we've come up with on the request of the Department of Education?
I suspect it is a standard term, but I'll clarify in the briefing notes.
Thank you.
Councillor Wallace.
I have another one, sorry. There was an additional annual cost of $2,000 for bin servicing. I was just wondering what frequency of collection and what volume does that provide for, and how often the bins are currently collected?
We'll endeavour to put something into the briefing notes in respect to that piece.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, that is 8.2. No, sorry, beg your pardon. 7.7. Outcome of community consultation on naming of Banks Reserve. And I believe.
Yeah, thanks. I just want,
Councillor Alexander.
thank you. I just wanted to ask some questions regarding the process, because there'll clearly be more of these processes. I see there's 154 people approved banks being changed to Warndulia, and that 258 surveys were done. And I think we, in Vincent, we've got over 38,000 residents. So how were these selected, or were these selected just around Banks Reserve? Or I'm just trying to understand how the cohort was picked, because at some stage too, I want to ask about Hyde Park parking, which is a different issue, but was going to be finished after 12 months, but nothing's been done about that particular one. So I just wanted to ask a range of questions about this. So, I mean, we have over 38,000 residents, and we've got 154 putting their hand up for a change of names. So I'm just interested in how those ones come to the fore and how it happens.
Through the chair. So all our community consultation is advertised through all the city's communication channels. This particular consultation was advertised in the paper, in Perth Now and Perth Voice. It's listed, all the channels used are listed in the report. The Imagine Vincent page is the way that we collect all the information that we receive through the feedback. So those, which is the online portal, yes, but we also indicate in all our advertising that feedback is available through hard copy surveys on request, and that people can call in and request a survey to be completed by a customer service team. So there are a range of ways that people can provide feedback. And that actually is a fairly high number of residents who have provided feedback on that particular project. Yeah.
No, Councillor Alexander.
Close to being insignificant, the number out of 38,422, according to the stats of Vincent in 2022 of residents. And I guess the next question is, how do you do it differently? But, when I go through this, and like on page 12 of 13, Len Collard makes some comments, which are very indeterminate. It could be this, or it could be that, or it could be this, or it could be that. Yet we end up going this way. So, and mind you, I know Len Collard, and I know Noel Nannup, who's also mentioned in in here who are all good people, but it all seems very loose in coming to a determination, and particularly 154 out of 38,422. So I just have some problem with very few people commenting and us making a change. And it's really it's the process I'm interested in. You know, I'm certainly supportive of maintaining Aboriginal heritage and all of this, but when we look at this one, the Wandoulia seems a very doubtful name in the end. So I just wanted to comment on that and, you know, query the process in which it's done.
So can I just clarify? So for the purposes of the briefing notes, would you like further information about how that particular name was arrived at? I'm just trying to clarify.
No, look, it's a very extensive briefing note here. And, you know, if you have a look on page 12, it's Banks Reserve renaming timeline. So, and that goes back to 2012. So there's been a long process, but the process seems pretty thin. And the information with regards to what the Aboriginal name could be seems, you know, like it's been plucked out of thin air.
As
Yes, CEO.
just to comment on the number of responses. So 258 surveys completed. The City of Vincent wouldn't get that large a number of responses to hardly any other issue that we put up. That might be in the top 5 or 10 responses in the last 12 months. We would have got we've got more for the strategic community plan response, and only the most contentious of the most contentious development applications get that number of survey responses. So in comparison, this would be as high a response as we could expect for any survey on any issue in the City of Vincent. No, just for comparative purposes. And most of our responses to most of our surveys on 95% of the other issues that we consult on much lower than that response. It indicates a high level of interest.
If I can just make a comment, I'm aware that this issue, the broader issue, or not in relation to this particular item, but the broader issue of community consultation is one that that a number of councillors have indicated that they would like to be able to discuss further. And I'm going to suggest it might be a good workshop for us to get together to talk about ways in which we could potentially improve and how we can have higher engagement. So, Councillor Alexander, would that be helpful for you, for us to actually prioritise this issue of community consultation and discuss this in a lot more detail in future to see if we can come up with some better ways of doing this?
Look, I think it'd be time well spent.
Okay, well, I'm really happy for that to be a priority. We can actually make a point of discussing that further. Because I'm looking around at councillors who've also raised similar concerns and wanting to see if we can do a better job. Okay, so if we're finished with that item, just checking no more questions on that. Okay, so the next item of which got questions is 8.2. Advertising of new policy, property investment and disposal policy. Believe Councillor Wallace, yes, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Zaman. This is a throwback, actually. I think this is one of the first questions I ever asked in council 4 years ago. The POS strategy has the following as action 5: prepare a POS land acquisition strategy to provide POS in strategic locations where gaps have been identified in the network, and it goes on from there. That strategy has been outstanding for some time, and it feels somewhat linked to this proposed policy revision. And, you know, I feel like it'd be worthwhile developing it in conjunction with this policy. What is the current status of the POS land acquisition strategy?
Through the chair, the approach that we've taken is the development of this new policy, which kind of sets out some rigor about how we would manage our land. This was prepared in response to a number of council workshops last year where proposals for ad hoc pieces of the city's land were coming forward, and council wanted a more clear, concise strategic direction about what our actual policy position was. So that's what this piece of work has sought to address. You are correct that a strategy would neatly fit with this, and we're seeing this as sort of a two-step process where we want to get some kind of rigor in place first, and then we'll undertake the strategy to identify the city's land and our approach to managing that.
I guess, is it worth having a policy level, the city's intent to acquire further POS? Should that be a subsection within this policy that they can then refer out to the strategy for detail?
Through the chair, it's certainly something that we can consider through this process.
Yeah, cool. Would you mind putting in the briefing notes like a potential section for inclusion?
Through the chair, no problem. We can include something in the briefing notes about that.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, so the next item is one of our confidential items. And so at this point, we go behind closed doors because there has been an indication that there is a question pertaining to this. So we're going to now turn off the public live stream and we won't be returning. And I really want to thank the public and the live stream viewers for your interest in the important work of this council. So I'm now closing